Hey guys, it's towniesimbuilds here, and welcome to a very special build for the Halloween season. So as you can tell, it's been a little while since my last build, but I did want to create something really special for the spooky season, and of course, it has been a little while since my last movie build as well. So of course, what better way to end the Halloween season with a build from Tim Burton? And as you can tell, this is the Church and Underworld from the Corpse Bride film. Now, this is honestly one of my favorite Halloween movies, but at the same time, I have not seen it in a very long time. I've actually had to sort of rewatch the movie. I kind of went through it, I took a lot of screenshots, and I was also looking at a lot of the behind-the-scenes shots as well. Because if you guys have ever tried to recreate a set from a TV show, a movie, maybe even a video game, it's super difficult, especially in The Sims 4. But anyways, we are seeing the full church come to life. The church itself is fairly simple, but it is in a very dark and gothic style, and it definitely has some very interesting features that are very iconic to the film. I did use the stained glass window from the Realm of Magic pack, and now you're seeing a lot of the sides come to life. The edges are actually known as flying buttresses, and it may sound like a weird name, but it is in fact what they're called. And they were the structural supports on the sides of churches, especially in the Gothic style. So you do see those. I did create some steeples as well. I had to get a little bit creative. We didn't really have good dome-like structures, if you will, using the packs I had. So I did have to improvise with some vents. But you know, of course, we are using the Vampires pack, so lots of good stuff there. I did use a lot of the trees, a lot of the brambles, and a lot of the dead bushes from the Vampires pack. And of course, if you have seen the movie, the film is so gloomy. I'm pretty sure the film is actually filmed almost in a grayscale, at least for the part that is not the Underworld. Now, I will say as well, unfortunately, the river, it just didn't work out, you guys. I was building the whole underground city, and unfortunately, for some reason or another, I could not have water over certain areas of the basement. So I kind of glazed over the river portion, but we will get back to that in a little bit. But of course, we are on the inside of the church now. Again, a fairly simple and straightforward space. I did create the elevated platform up front, and we do have the white tablecloth table and the candle from the movie as well. If you guys know, that was where the marriage was supposed to take place. Obviously, there is a really cool fight scene towards the end, and the main villain offs himself with the poison, which unfortunately we don't have in the game. I was looking for bottles, I was looking for wine, or at least a goblet, I would say, but unfortunately I couldn't really find something to put there, but hopefully that does work. Like I said, the inside is fairly simple, lots of gothic archways. I did use the Vampire's bench to serve as the pews per se, and of course lots of candles also from the Vampire's pack. Now we do see the pastor in the movie. Don't really know too much about him, but he is a pretty grim man. But he does get a good spook later on in the film when the undead come into the land of the living. Now, I do know that he does live within the church, but again, we don't see that space in the movie, so I thought it would be fun to make this sort of crypt-like underground space for him. So it's super basic. We do have the bathroom towards the left, again using a lot of the content from the Vampires pack. He does have a bedroom in the middle, and then a very small kitchenette, which I believe is mostly content from the Cottage Living pack. You can see I'm kind of fumbling around with different objects. I'm trying to squeeze in just a little bit of a partial counter. But again, not really sure if it's fully functional. I do think it is. I just tried to create a very compact space. There is a little dining table here as well, which I'm trying to sort of sort out the whole chair situation. And then I go in and add a few more details as well, like a standing mirror, just a little notebook here, and of course, lots of distress along the walls. The cracks, the spider webs, everything from the Vampires pack was honestly really perfect for this build. But other than that, that is pretty much it for his living space. The main event, of course, is the Underworld, and the Underworld probably took me the most time. I would say the church itself was probably only, I would say, a fifth of the time I spent on this whole lot itself. And to be a little bit more creative and hidden with the entrance itself, I did decide to create a cemetery. Now, I don't believe there is a cemetery in the movie, but I thought it was a really fun detail. I did include that really large, gnarly tree towards the left, and that is where I believe Victor encounters Emily for the first time. So that is where her skeletal hand is there. He puts a ring on it, not knowing that is her corpse, and hence she comes to life. But anyways, we're just finishing up with a few details on the cemetery itself. The mausoleum will be the entrance to the underworld, so it'll go about 3 layers down into a very large basement, and that is where I'll be sculpting a lot of the different stores, houses, and businesses that exist in the underworld. Now, here we go, you guys. The river, I just couldn't do it. It was not functioning in the game. So I had to sort of improvise with this. I did reference the movie quite a bit. So we do use some debug walls from the Cottage Living pack, trying to keep with that very rundown, gray, gloomy feel. And of course, instead of having water, I do use a lot more brambles from the Vampires pack. I do add in some stones as well. So I'm thinking, you know, maybe the river dried up. Maybe this is the leftover bits of it, the remnants of the water, I would say. Anyways, we are diving deep down, and this is going to be the whole underworld itself. It definitely took me a few tries. I definitely had to scope out the basement space. And of course, because I was fitting more or less an entire town in this space, it was really difficult to fit in all the buildings from the movie itself. But I do think it worked out fairly well. Obviously, the main attraction is the Ball and Socket pub. And if you guys remember the film itself, when Emily and Victor kiss, they are automatically transported into this sort of underworld bar, if that makes any sense. So this bar was definitely inspired from the film. I also referenced a few collectible items of the bar itself, so that is mainly what inspired the shape. You can see I'm kind of working on this little, I guess I can say outdoor balcony, even though it's underground, but that was part of the building itself. Now, one of the other main areas was actually the Room of the Elder, and that is the space where Emily and Victor kind of go to seek advice. Obviously, Victor is not very keen on a marriage with an undead woman, and Emily, of course, still wants to be his wife. They still want to be together, and they're trying to come up with a solution on what to do next. So he does live in a tower. That is definitely kind of what I was trying to emulate there. It's definitely a lot taller in the film, but of course, we're only working with 2 layers of basement, so hopefully it does suffice. There is also another scene where Emily runs away after their encounter with the Elder, and there is a large red door with a coffin nearby it. So that is another area of the town I was trying to create. And then also this really weird shop. I believe the shop was selling arms, if that makes sense. Considering that there are quite a bit of undead residents down here, so I'm sure limbs are breaking off all the time, and that is why such a shop exists. Wild, but it is part of the film, and it was definitely something I wanted to keep. Another area next to the tower is another sort of balcony area that is also seen in the film, and that is right before Emily and Victor go to see the Elder. So it is a pretty small area. It's right after Victor is running away from her after he has his encounter in the bar, and that is where she ultimately finds him. Speaking of the bar, we're going inside now, and this was a really fun yet very tricky space to create. The angles in the movie, you guys, I was going between different screenshots. It was very chaotic trying to figure out the true layout of this space, especially because I couldn't find a replica of this space online. So hopefully I did get it fairly close. There is a pretty expansive bar area, and the hutches are sort of taking the place of coffins, which do appear in the film. Now, there is also a musician in the space that I do believe is called Bone Jangles, if I'm not mistaken, and he is voiced by the very iconic Danny Elfman, who does a lot of the Tim Burton music. So we do have a center stage up there. We do have a foosball table. It's actually a pool table in the film, but unfortunately I did not have that object in the packs I was using. We also have the piano that Emily plays, and Victor shares a moment with her that is very similar to his first moment in the film with Victoria. So that is the little area towards the left. They each kind of have their own little nooks, so I did my best to recreate that. Like I said, this is a very cramped space, so you guys saw a lot of smaller dining tables, a lot of chairs crammed in, but hopefully it is a fun place for your Sims and occult Sims to enjoy. Another area that was attached to the bar was this little kitchen, and it shows up in a very brief part of the film. I think at this point, Emily is still talking to the elder, and she's also talking to the head chef. Again, feeling very remorseful. I don't know if she had this song yet with the maggot, if they only knew the you that we knew. But again, it's a very melancholy time for her. I would say that honestly, this movie is one of the very few that has made me cry, because if you guys have seen the ending to it, yeah. Emily does not quite get the justice she deserves, but it's a wonderful film nonetheless. Anyways, we do work on the second floor. This is kind of the open balcony overlooking the stage below. We do see a very small bit of this with the chairs and tables at the top, but honestly, most of this is my own creation. Now, looking at bars, I figured, you know what, we're going to splatter the walls with different paintings and portraits, and overall trying to keep that gothic spooky edge there. I do also add in a few game tables from the Get Together pack, just to give your Sims some more activities. And then of course these very luscious, I guess I would say gothic or Victorian inspired couches as well, just next to the little game area there. Other than that, I think this pretty much rounds out the pub area itself. Again, unfortunately, we never see the second floor in the movie, so I did kind of have to make do with what I had and kind of fit the theme with what was around it. Going back to the tower itself, this was again another very tricky place to recreate. Unfortunately, I would say that the building itself is not too indicative of the one in the film. I definitely would have liked to give it more height, make it taller, but I did try to emulate a lot of the distress along the wall. So you will see a lot of cracks and crumbles, just like the film. But this main room is probably one of my favorites in the Underworld itself. Now, the Elder kind of sits atop this very large platform. There is a little tunnel underneath it, but of course, with the parameters of The Sims 4, I wasn't able to create a space under the platform. But it does have a little bit of elevation. I do use the base game desk and the get-together chair there, and then I pile in some more base game desks and also the base game bookcase as well. Trying to give the walls some height, I did stack them up accordingly and just kind of surrounding the walls itself. And overall, this will turn into a very messy space. If you guys remember the film, he has tons of books, tomes, pretty much littered everywhere and also stacking on the platform area itself. So the base game object was perfect for this. I did also use the spell books that came with Realm of Magic, and now I'm just adding a few more touches as well. So I'm just adding some base game curtains, and the windows, you guys, they were smashed to bits. I wish I could have made them more distressed, but I did use a lot of the cracks from the Vampires pack just to kind of emulate what was seen in the film. Now, the main courtyard area is very interesting. There is what appears to be a skeletal horse sculpture, I think. So I did try to create something similar. I did use the sort of evil fanged llama from the Vampires pack. And if you guys look in the distance, there are quite a bit of string lights in the film. So I did use the debug object from the Cottage Living pack in order to emulate that detail. Going in now, I'm trying to finesse more of the details around the town. This, of course, is the details on the arm shop, I guess. I don't really know what the true name is, but there are, in fact, buckets with arms inside, so I thought that was fairly fitting. I'm going in and also pulling in a lot more of the debug objects from the Vampires pack. I did want to make this feel more like a town, so I do use a lot of the street lamps, and you will see I will eventually block off areas of the city as well. Going back, this is the red door seen in the film with Emily, and of course there is a coffin there that she sits in, and the walls themselves are very distressed. They're very crumbly, I would say. There are lots of stones and rocks that have fallen around it, so that is definitely an area I want to keep consistent with the film. Going in, I'm just adding a few more details to the balcony area, also seen in the film, and there's not really too much going on here. I just add a few more bits of spider webs, cracks, and also the bench that Emily and Victor eventually sit on, right before they go and see the Elder. Now at this point in the speed build, I've pretty much created all the sets I could find in the movie itself. And unfortunately, if you guys have watched Corpse Bride, we don't get to see every building in the Underworld. So one of the ones that stood out was actually this very narrow tower that was next to the pub itself. It was definitely very derelict, it was very crumbly, I would say. And the door and the signage on it was very mystical, so I would guess this would be a fortune teller shop or even a psychic shop, if you will. And we will get to see a lot of the storefronts on the first floor. Obviously, for the sake of time, we can't go into every nook and cranny in the Underworld, but hopefully you guys do enjoy exploring this lot if you do put it in your game. Now overall, like I said, I did want to create this sort of weird dark void on the edges of the city. So I do wall off little sections of the town itself using the Vampires Pack fencing, and of course placing in more of the street lamps and also the dead trees as well. It was a pretty cool little effect. It did kind of remind me of perhaps Twilight Town from Kingdom Hearts, or if you guys have played Baldur's Gate, it's kind of reminiscent of the world that fell into darkness. So that was the overall feel and vibe I was going for. Now, like I said, there are a lot of businesses that are not really explored in the film. So next to the pub itself, I did create a sort of makeshift restaurant. Obviously, this does not use dine out, but it does mimic a restaurant. We do have a dining area towards the front, and then a very tight and narrow kitchen as well. I would say it's more or less like the one seen in the pub, just very simple with all of the amenities. And of course, sticking true to the Underworld, lots of cracks, lots of distress, lots of tears along the wall, and even some really interesting gargoyle statues as well. Like I said, we do move back to the smaller tower, and I do my best to make this a fortune teller shop. Obviously, if Paranormal Pack was used here, I would be using the crystal ball, but I do think this was fairly fitting for a seance. It is definitely very gothic and dark. It's very indicative of the church itself, and I do use a lot of these awesome objects from the Realm of Magic pack. So we do have a lunar cycle rug and also a painting as well. I do use a chalkboard, perhaps it's for scheduling even. And of course, just like the seance rooms, my other builds, I do resort to my favorite base game paintings. So they could be possible ancestors or distant relatives that could have been summoned in that space. We do, of course, move on to the next room, and this is the space right behind the red door where Emily is seen. And I was taking inspiration from the coffins. Unfortunately, I originally planned for this to be some sort of funeral parlor, but you know what? Space was very limited. I did make this sort of a tombstone engraving shop, if I can even call it that. I do have some gravestones pulled from Debug from the Vampires pack, and they do have separate storage spaces. I do have some urns for sale as well, and then I do use the base game wood chopping bench as well, sort of as a makeshift engraving station. Now we do have a few different spaces left in this build, and one of the spaces is actually the arms shop, which honestly, you guys, I really didn't know how to design. I kind of thought of a retail space over a clinic, if that makes sense. So I figured if a lot of the spirits, if a lot of the undead are needing arms, this could be the shop where they could get new ones possibly. And of course, I did have to use the base game object once more, which thankfully worked out great. It did fit on the shelves fairly well. And of course, it did come in some different colors, so I guess that's a plus. Again, it's a very strange shop to make, so fairly simple. I did make some archways where there could be sort of back inventory, if that makes sense. And then there was also this very interesting little divot on the right side as well, which I do put a full-length mirror. So I guess your Sims or undead Sims could try on new arms. I don't really know if that makes sense, but I did want to stick with the lore of the movie itself. Now, unfortunately, because I was not using the Get to Work pack, I probably was missing a few essential items, but I did add some extra seating to try on the arms, and also used some signage from the Cottage Living pack as well. Of course, we are moving on to the final area of the underground world, and this is the main landing area from the mausoleum itself. So it's a fairly simple room, but I did want to pay homage to Emily. So the room is very gloomy, it's very pale blue, much like her skin, and it is very indicative of a cemetery. Of course, as one final detail, I do use the fairy statue from the Vampires pack, just as a little homage to her butterfly scene at the end of the film. Alright guys, and that is a wrap on the church and underworld scene in Tim Burton's Corpse Bride. Now, if you are a fan of the film, I really do hope you guys enjoy this a lot, and definitely feel free to let me know if I did the movie justice. Now, this is quite a quirky build that you can use as a wedding chapel, you can use it as a bar, or even as a residential lot as well. So please feel free to make use of it as you see fit. Just like always, this is still a no CC, no mod limited pack build, and will be available on the Sims 4 gallery. I'll leave you guys now with the final lot specs, along with the final cinematic shots so you can see how everything turned out in the end. And of course, this has been towniesimbuilds signing off. Thank you so much for watching, guys.